Now that we're ready to animate, I'm just going to close up all these groups here. I'm going to start with this headline. So I'm going to open up this group, and I'm just going to turn off these other groups for the moment, just so I can see these better. I'm going to start with this black banner in the headline, so I'll go ahead and turn these other ones off as well. I'm going to select my black banner and start to animate this. So this is roughly where I want it to land, right around 20. I'm going to set a keyframe and then rewind my timeline. And I'm just going to have this come in from the right side, so I'm going to move it on the X position and set a keyframe. I'm going to do the exact same thing for these following Nagi. So the green banner here, I'm just going to set my timeline where I want it to land. I'm going to set a keyframe, then rewind my timeline again and move the X position off the screen and set keyframe. I'm going to move down to the white banner, click on the transformation editor, and set my timeline again where I want it to land. I'm going to set the keyframe, then rewind this timeline again. And I'm not too concerned with the timing right now. I can always go back and readjust this later in the stage. So I'm going to set a keyframe there. I got one more in this headline group to do, and it's the rectangle. So I'll just do the exact same thing here. This is where I want it to land. I'll set a keyframe there. I'll rewind my timeline and move the position over on the X and set key. Now if I hit play, each one of these comes out. It's okay. I could go into the stage and readjust it, but for time reasons, we're just going to move on here to the subline group. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this one on or unhide it. And since I have these two grouped, instead of doing them individually, I'm just going to animate the whole group in. So I'm going to highlight this group, and here on my timeline, this is roughly where I want it to land. So I'll hit set key and then rewind my timeline again and just move these position over to the right hand side of the screen and hit set key again. Okay, so now we have two things animating. Let's move down to the picture box. I'm going to turn the picture off for the moment and just work with the Nagi. If you want to rename these, you can. It can always help you in the stage later when you go to readjust these things. So we'll just call this picture back. This time I just want this to scale up. So I'm going to set my axis center to the right and to the top. And my timeline here, this is roughly where I want it to land. I'll hit set key, then rewind the timeline again and decrease my scaling up to 0 and hit set key. So now that animates on as well. The last thing I need for this is to animate the picture on. So we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to set my axis center to the right and to the top. And if you need to turn your bounding box on to see where exactly it is, you can use this to judge where your axis center is. Say roughly I want it to land around here. I'm going to hit set keyframe. I'm going to rewind the timeline and just scale this up as well. And I'm going to hit set key. So we hit play, and now those two things come on together. And now that I actually have that animating on, what I want to do is actually just copy this rectangle and add a little design element here. So I'm going to get rid of the picture on that. I'm going to come into my rectangle. I'm going to turn my use vertex colors on. I'm going to select my first color chip, use the color picker to select this green color again, and just slide each color down onto the other colors. I'm going to close this up, and I'm going to use another plugin here called the Expert. So I'm going to go into the container plugins, into the global folder, and drag the Expert plugin onto my rectangle. I'm going to click on the Expert, and I'm going to change this draw mode from normal to outline. And when I do that, you can see that it adds a little outline of the picture here. And since we already had the animation on it, when we hit play, that outlined rectangle actually animates on as well. Alright, so we're going to move down to the drop line here. And I'm going to animate these individually. So I'm going to first start with the Nagi. I'm going to highlight this container here, click on the transformation editor, adjust my timeline, hit set key, and then rewind the timeline again. And let's move this off to the right here with the X position and hit set key. Since I have my green and my white banner grouped together here, I'm just going to use the group to move these in. Again, we'll just set our timeline where we want it to land. I'll hit set key, then rewind the timeline and move these off to the right as well. So when I hit play, you can see each element here animates on. Now let's go and animate our text. So I'm going to turn on our text group here. I'm going to use our text effects again. So I'm going to go into the built-ins, container plugins, text effects folder, and we're just going to use the TFX scale again. So I'm going to drop this onto the headline, click on the TFX scale. By default, my progress percentage is at 0, so I'm just going to increase that to 100. This is where I want it to land, roughly about 58, so I'm going to hit set key. Then I'm going to rewind the timeline to a random number here, and I'm just going to decrease my progress percentage back down to 0 and hit set key. Now that I have that animation on this TFX scale, I can just copy this TFX scale plugin down to the next line, and it takes the animation with it. Now I just want to flip-flop how these come on. This first headline text comes on from left to right. The subline I want to come on the opposite direction, so we're going to change this direction here to opposite. So we're going to change this direction here to opposite. So I hit play once more and can see how they animate on as well. Now the last line here is the drop line. So if I want, I can just take one of these text effect scales and add that to it as well. It carries the animation with it, and there you can see that it animates on. If you want to readjust it, we'll just go ahead and click on the animation or spoked wheel on our container. It takes us right into that animation in the stage, and if you want to kind of readjust the speed of it here, you can do that as well. Alright, so we have our animation set up. Now we need to add the control plugins so that we can swap these things out in Trio. So let's go into the built-ins, into the container plugins, and our control folder. First one that I'm going to do is drop a control text onto our headline text. So I drop this control plugin on there. I click on the control plugin and it takes us into the editor. The field identifier, I'm going to leave it 1. The description is headline, that's fine. The other settings I'm just going to leave as default. I'm going to drag another control text onto my subline. I'm going to click on that to go into the editor. I'm going to change the field identifier to 2, and the description is subline, so that's fine. I'm going to leave the default settings on this as well. Now the third thing that I want to swap out is this picture. So I'm going to go ahead and open my picture box group here, and I'm going to use this control image to swap out the picture. So I'm going to drop a control image onto my rectangle here. If you want to rename this, you can. Again, we'll just actually call this picture. I'm going to click on the control image. I'm going to go into the editor here and change the field identifier to 3. If you want to change the description, since we renamed it after we dropped the image on it, it didn't pick up our new naming conventions. So if we just want to add picture in here, we can. Now we can give them control to move the image position or scale the position, but we're just going to leave these off for now. The last thing here is the drop line, and we're going to do a little bit different here. We do need a control text so that they'll be able to retype new text in here. So I'm going to drop a control text plugin on it. I'm going to click on the control text plugin. My field identifier is going to be 4, since it's the 4th element that we want to change here. However, we may not always want this drop line. So what we want to do is set this scene up so that if there is no text typed into that drop line, it will automatically hide this drop line. So we can use this plugin here called Control Hide. I'm going to take this Control Hide and drop it onto my drop line group. And this Control Hide on Empty plugin actually says that if this text has nothing in it, it's going to hide this group. So I'm going to click on my Control Hide, and I'm going to make the field identifier the same as this text, which is 4. I'm going to keep the description the same and turn off this treat input as numerical value. So I'm just going to turn that switch off. Now, last thing that we need to do really is to create a stop point and our out animations. So I'm going to go into the stage, and here we have our director. All of our animations fell into this default director. I highlight that and our stop point becomes active, so I'm just going to advance my timeline out to where everything is on the screen, and I'll place my stop point right there. And when I click that button, we get this little triangle here with a black line that goes down throughout our whole animation. So now I just need to create our out animations. And again, I'm going to use this same trick that we used before by holding down C and copying my keyframes. So I'm going to select each keyframe, hold down C, click and drag. So I'm just doing this to save us some time. Now you may want to pay a little bit more attention to where these keyframes fall and the speed of these keyframes and stuff, but for our purposes here in this demonstration, we're just going to try to quickly move through these and move each keyframe out here so that we can demonstrate the out animation. Okay, I got them copied, and like I said, I didn't pay too much attention to the speed of it, but you can always go back and readjust them if need be. So let's play this out here. We'll go and click the play button. It starts the animation, everything comes in. If we hit the continue button here, everything is going to fly out. So now we're all set to take these scenes into Trio and actually test them out. So let's save our scene here, and we'll jump over into Trio.